Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to our second week in this series where we're diving into characters in the line of Jesus. Uh, we're diving into Noah this week. Connor, trivia question. What does the name Noah mean?
I have no puns available.
Yeah, Noah puns.
Oh, there you go.
You're so close to saying it. Yeah, you need to brush up on your ancient Hebrew there, bud. So we're going to dive into Noah. Apologies for those that are listening like live as we're kind of releasing these. I wrote these back when I was too nervous to make people read too much. And so I cut it off halfway through chapter 9, even though Noah goes through chapter 9. I think I just didn't want to talk about certain stories with my small group. Jared now is like, oh yeah, we're gonna read that. So you can feel free to read all through chapter 9. And the answer to the trivia question that all of you are shouting at home is rest. Noah means rest. I think it actually says it. Well, not his chapter 5. His dad named him Noah, saying, "This one will bring us relief from the agonizing labor of our hands." So I recorded a bonus video yesterday where I talked about the names of all the people. So when I release that, you'll get to see that.
Is that what you told us what his name meant?
Yeah, so you haven't got
So
to.
I haven't seen it.
Everybody else is like, Connor's in the last episode, but you haven't seen
Connor
it.
doesn't watch his videos. It's not been out yet.
Yeah. All right. So let's start off this week. We're going to jump into personal application. And so we can each share just one personal application as you read these passages. What kind of stood out to you is like, what do I take from it? And Asha, why don't you take it?
One of the ones that we put down was like for us, like faith is required to please God. And yeah, I don't really remember why we put that on there, but
I'm looking at Hebrews 6 or Hebrews 11:6. It says, "And without faith, it's impossible to please Him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that He exists and that He rewards those who seek Him." And 7, okay. Because by faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen, in reverent fear constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By this he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. And so like mine was faith is what saves us. That's from that same kind of passage. It's like if Noah didn't have faith in God, he wouldn't have built that ark and he would have been swimming with the fishes.
Yep. And I kind of like, especially the phrase Asha came with, faith is required to please God. That kind of stood, when you said that, I was like, whoa, because we live in 2025 where people don't want to hear phrases like that. They're like, but I'm a good person. And Connor backed you up with some Hebrews there and is like, faith is required to please God. So mine was along the same vein. Be obedient to God and not the world, because the world gets you drowned.
Yeah. Literally.
Literally.
Oh, man.
That was good. I'm going to giggle about that for a while.
Good. All right. There's probably a lot to talk about with Noah. And so I don't really know where you guys want to start, but I did want to get those personal application things kind of out there. That's how I kind of run small group is I just randomly pick a spot for us to talk. And when you have a larger group, that discussion could go on for a while. But
yeah.
So why don't we just kind of go to our notes and questions, thoughts, and wonderings, either about Noah specifically or the whole flood story. What do you guys?
I think I remember back when we were reading this, we read verse 2 where it says, "The sons of God saw the daughters of man were attractive." And then later in verse 4 it mentions the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. And so Asha asked, were the Nephilim the sons of God, or are those like the children? And I'm like, uh, good question, because I couldn't tell you. I know that they were tall. They're
Right.
giants.
Giants.
But I don't know if Nephilim refers to the sons of God or the sons of the sons of God.
It would refer, yeah. So what this is the Bible doesn't just give you, and here's what you want to know. It's like,
Mhm.
hey, we're just going to sprinkle a little here, and we'll pick up that kind of story later. And you're supposed to kind of connect these ideas and think about it. And so this is introducing what will later come up in other stories, or the giants, um, all the way through to King David, where they're
Mhm.
killing the last of the giants.
Mhm.
Um, so when it says sons of God, this is, it could just refer to sons of God, like where humans are sons of God, or one
Mhm.
interpretation I've heard is like you could say sons of something is like a category. So like sons of God would be like heavenly beings, like that sort of type. Not that
Mhm.
they are gods themselves. Um, and so I think most people read this as um, a evil done by heavenly spirits. Um, Even though it doesn't call it out as evil, bringing up the Nephilim is connecting that to an evil act. So
Hmm.
I think there's also language there that's reminiscent of the fall of Adam and Eve, where they, I think I mentioned these guys, you'll see this come up a lot. They saw, just like how
Mhm.
Eve saw the fruit that it was good,
Yeah.
those sons of God saw the women that they were good, took for themselves. So you
Hmm.
see that same language. It's the fall story, but just
That
from the
means
heavenly
it all
beings.
starts with the first look. You guard your eyes.
Guard your eyes.
Yeah.
Um, Now, this opens up an interesting question that I thought was going to come up later. But so here we have the introduction of the Nephilim, followed by the story of everybody on Earth getting wiped out.
Mm.
But the Nephilim show up later
Mhm.
stories. And so that opens the question for, okay, when it says everyone was wiped out, is that literal or just like it was a big flood,
Mm.
Mhm.
Like a local flood.
local flood?
Yeah.
That's one um, theory because the Mesopotamian plains are known for flooding. Um, and there's multiple flood stories in other cultures as well. So this is probably some historic event, some massive flood. Um, um, or did you guys see that weird that Noah movie that came out?
Yes.
Did you see that?
I hated it.
I've only seen bits of it. It's like that's weird. The little rock giant
Yeah.
things.
Was that supposed to be the Nephilim or?
No, I think they just didn't want to have the build montage for the literal hundred of years.
Mm.
Mhm.
And so they said, we'll give them helpers. I don't know where that came from. But they did include in that movie a way for other people to survive through the flood. I think they had somebody sneak on board of the boat in that movie.
Okay. Okay.
So that's
As
another
the one.
interpret that actually comes from Hebrew interpretation. Some people theorized people snuck on. So those are your options for,
That'd be a long time to hang on to the side of a boat.
well, I
But
think they snuck in,
yeah.
but because that's not just the Nephilim. You also later will be introduced to the people, they're called the Cainites, like descendants of Cain.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, but wouldn't Cain's descendants have been wiped out? So, however you want to interpret that, there are some people listed before this story who were there after.
Mhm.
And if like an argument, I guess, for a worldwide flood, like couldn't the sons of God have came down again later, like different
Like
sons of God?
afterwards.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I don't know.
And this is where I think it's healthy for a Christian to, all right, let me look at the options that are available. Make sure, hey, if it's not really a worldwide flood, does that ruin who God is? No.
Yeah.
And I still believe that God could do a worldwide flood. I'm not cutting that out. And I
Mhm.
just weigh my options and kind of pick what I think. And if you think different, that's fine. This isn't our core theology. Um, and then you just remain open to more evidence as you learn more about it.
Mhm.
So, as opposed to somebody who starts reading about sons of God and worldwide floods and then freak out.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem healthy.
Yeah. I think the thing to take away from reading this, aside from like, was it worldwide or local, was what God saw, like, which is the wickedness and his reaction to it.
Mhm.
And does it say how long? I think it was a while. They had all the chance to like clean themselves up before God got to a point where he's
Yep.
like, all right, restart, you know?
There's a couple different timelines that you could look at for that because I was looking at the years too. Um, you got it introduces Noah, says he was 500 years old
Mm-hmm.
just before chapter 6, and then when he's 600, that's when the floods come. So at
Yeah.
least 100 years if you're going by that count. And then some people will point to their days will be 120 years as not a restriction on lifespan because you have a bunch of people after this who live longer than 120 years,
Yeah.
but as 120 years from now, a flood will come.
Oh,
So some people would put that quote as happening 120 years before the flood happens.
okay.
And so that's another interpretation that when that was pointed out to me, I went, oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense.
Mhm.
It's a little out of order because Noah's already 500 and then it says that. So, I don't know how all that fits together, but that's something I've heard and I said, that sort of makes sense. Even though the lifespan of humans is also roughly 120 years
Yeah.
Mhm.
max, with a few people that just so lucky. I'll be satisfied with just living 100 and then going to sleep and then I
Yeah.
just go. That's just hit my triple digits.
Yep. Yep. That's the way to do it. Connor says he has to go before me, though.
Oh, selfish.
I know.
Yes.
My wife and I just say same time.
Yeah.
There's so many rabbit trails I can run off. I'm gonna be good. There's podcasts about Noah, not about dying with your spouse.
Right.
Okay. Let's see.
Um, one other thing I'll point out, maybe I'll ask and see. So let's talk about the ark a little bit
Mhm.
because the ark has some connections elsewhere in the Bible. Let me see what you guys got, and I'll kind of chime in as well.
Um, I'd say one thing that, like, when it's come to the story of Noah and even just building the ark, how like God was very specific on like
Mhm.
this is how you need to build it. Whether it's, what does it say, 300 cubits length and 50 cubits it's breadth.
Mine just
50
translated it into feet if you want that. So
Yeah.
400 feet long, 70 feet wide, and 45 feet high.
Yeah. Um, but I always thought how like that was like pretty cool. And two, I've been to the like Ark, the Noah's
Oh,
Ark
yeah.
thing, and that's really cool because they show like different ways you could have built the Ark and how they literally would not have survived. Whereas like God's design was literally like perfect, and that's why the Ark survived. Um, and so I always thought that was really cool.
Yeah. I was just reading in my Bible notes. So I think it's called the Gilgamesh, which is another ancient story that has a flood story in it. And in their flood story, the boat that was built as a square. And they said that wouldn't have stayed up like the barge shape that Noah built. So our story's better. Get out of your Gilgamesh.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think in the Gilgamesh, the reason the in their version, of course, they have multiple gods. They sent the flood because humans were just being too loud and they were ruining their sleep.
That's
So,
awesome.
See, and people say that God was too mean in the Old Testament. Meanwhile, you're too loud.
yeah, right. And I'll wait 100 to 120 years. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, isn't that weird that we grew up and you get told like Old Testament's mean God, but then like the more you learn, like it's literally one of Noah's, or not Noah's, in the book of Jonah, he complains that God is too patient. And you read that and you're like, that's not what I was taught growing up.
Yeah.
Um, he's very patient.
Mhm.
If you think about how long Israel and Judah went in their sins,
Mhm.
and he waited and waited.
You just read the book of Judges. You're just like, oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
yeah. Judges. Um, it's actually so when we read our Bible and it says, and you read the phrase, and God is slow to anger,
Mhm.
what's actually being translated there is a Hebrew idiom. And what, if you translate it like word to word, it says God is long of nostril. Because like in their idea is like anger would be like steam coming out your nose.
Mm.
So if he has a long nostril, he's patient and then lets the steam out or something. So that's the
Mhm.
phrase that's used when you read he's slow to anger. It says he was long of nose. Just for those of you that love Bible translation.
Fascinating. I think one thing that kind of piggyback off of Asha saying God is specific,
Mhm.
um, what stood out to me is it wasn't just two of every kind of animal.
Mhm.
He also had was it seven?
Seven
Mhm.
clean pairs.
Seven clean pairs of clean animals. I don't know if that was for sacrificing while on the ark or for when you got off the ark, you had more clean animals to use
Right.
to repopulate. So,
Well, we did know that he sacrificed right when he got off. So if he only
yeah.
had two of that, that
Mhm.
would have ended that animal right then and there.
Mhm.
Well,
But
goodbye, dear.
yeah, um, should have sacrificed mosquitoes.
Yeah.
Um,
That wouldn't be very
Stink
holy. That would have been very
bugs.
holy, though.
no. So I guess you pick seven as like a holy number,
Mhm.
Mhm.
completeness.
Mhm.
Actually, there this is riddled with like those numbers that pop up.
Yeah.
If you look at like the different timeline of when the rain stopped and all that stuff, it's like, and then the seventh month, on the seventh day, on the 10th month, on the first day, like all these days that are like wink, wink, nod, nod. We got special numbers. So, I like to point out the arc. Um, this isn't the first time that something is built like this and described as being wrapped with tar or pitch. And that's when Moses gets put in a little basket. And I think that's actually in the Hebrew, it's the
Whoa.
same word. And she puts tar on it. So, like, the Moses story is harkening back to this. And where is he placed? Into the waters. And so it's like a very cool reference when you're reading Moses to go, wait, that's the little baby ark.
Mhm.
That's cute.
Um, And then I wrote this for my foreshadowing of Christ. The ark is like a type of Jesus because it saves them from the judgment, which would be the flood waters, just like Jesus saves us from the judgment. So
Is there any correlation to the Ark and the Ark of the Covenant having? They're not spelled the same, right?
I believe those are,
The
well,
sea.
I think they're spelled the same in English, but I think they're separate words in Hebrew.
Okay. Okay, nothing there. Cool.
But that is where most people go, oh, ark. But they're,
Mhm.
yeah. Well, cool. So we get the flood, and then we get a bunch of stories. The water recedes. Lord makes the promise that he won't do that again. It's funny, he promises that he won't destroy the earth with the flood again. And then in other accounts where there's like, say, Sodom and Gomorrah, he'll mention it like a flood of fire. It's like, I
Mhm.
didn't flood it with water.
Yeah.
But so you'll see kind of, you don't have flood stories again, but sometimes he's like, fire.
Yeah. Iron brimstone.
I think I'd take the fire over the flood of water.
Yeah.
Make it quick.
And so speaking of Sodom and Gomorrah, that would have been quick.
Mhm.
Like archaeologists have like found well, geologists and archaeologists have found evidence that that area experienced a meteor.
Mm.
So like they're like, oh no, something. And what happens with meteors if they're powerful enough, they don't actually get down to the ground, they actually explode above the ground. And it just like, I mean, the shockwave just decimates everything. And
Mm.
then the land gets filled with all these mineral salts. And so all
That's
that salt is just kind of just draining into the Dead Sea. So
Mm.
that's why nothing grows around there.
Do you think like a fragment came and got Lot's wife and she turned to a
That's what
pillar?
she
There you
saw
go.
to the
It's just a
pillar.
little pillar of the. She
Can't
turned
prove
into a pillar
that,
of
but there you
salt.
go. Um, so I like that, modern day, like this was fairly recent that
Mhm.
people are like, hey, here's the evidence. And so that's awesome that like still to this day we're uncovering like, hey, however, whether you take like the Bible is true or not, it's clearly when it's talking about Sodom and Gomorrah, referencing something that happened and there's memory of it. Same thing with the flood. There's probably some memory of some catastrophic flood, even if you don't think the Bible's real, is at least pointing to that. But we do think the Bible's real. Why don't we jump into strengths and weaknesses? Because I think when we talk about weaknesses, we'll get to the Forbidden Chapter 9 story.
Mhm. I feel like you can't mention his strengths without mentioning why God chose him to be
Mm-hmm.
the one building the ark. Is because God called him a righteous man.
Mm-hmm.
So he was. I don't know. In reading Genesis 6, it didn't say. Let me go back. It said something about the Nephilim, and then it said, "I will blot out man whom I've created." Did it say that the world was? I guess it
Verse
doesn't.
8.
5. I guess it's. I guess he's not blotting out the world because of Nephilim. I think it's that and other things. Right?
Yeah. There's sort of an implication that, like, okay, so I didn't mention this earlier. Um, what the Bible's doing is it's connecting the Nephilim with the bad stuff that humans are doing by themselves. So it's not the
Yeah.
Nephilim's fault, but they're definitely connecting those two ideas together.
Yeah.
Because in other cultures, they would be like Babylon, they would be describing their kings as partly divine.
Yeah.
And so, and they're viewing that as a good thing. And so the Bible's sitting here and it makes this kind of jab like, yeah, that's kind of the problem.
Mhm.
So you see, there's actually, it's kind of cool. I mean, most people I don't think are going to dig into a bunch of other um, ancient
Yeah.
scripts and other stories. Um, but if you like that sort of thing, Bible Project talks about that a bit to draw a kind of comparison of at the time this was being written, what were other ideas going around. And so it draws light to certain things and why it's phrased in the Bible. So, like, if you look at the creation story in Genesis 1, and it talks about when the sun and moon are created, it doesn't say sun and moon. It's like, and I'll create lanterns in the sky or lights. One will be great and one will be lesser. It doesn't say sun and moon because the Hebrew word for sun and moon, or the Aramaic, whatever language it was, that would have been the name of one of the deities of the Canaanite culture. So they didn't want to use the name just to describe the sun. And so they just used, like, there's some lights up there, just so that no one would be confused and think that the sun's a god.
Like God created smaller gods.
Right.
Yeah.
So they didn't want that confusion. So they said there's a greater light and a lesser light. And so when you understand kind of their culture and where they're at, that explains why they would use a certain phrase like that. I heard one interpretation about this, Noah being a righteous man. When I read it in my Bible version, it didn't really come across, but maybe some others it reads a bit different. But some people interpret Noah may not have been like the greatest guy, but he was righteous in his time. Like compared to everybody else, he's all right. That's not how it came across when I read it for this, but I have heard that interpretation. He seems to listen and obey, so I lean more
I
towards
feel like maybe you have something with he was all right for his time, because verse 9 or chapter 9 comes out of nowhere. If you think he's this amazing guy, and then chapter 9 hits. I mean, he did watch most of what he thought the world, like from his perspective, the world got flooded. Kind of would be traumatic. But like, I don't know. It also just kind of like, oh, okay, chapter 9 happened. Weird.
Yep.
So maybe he was just a pretty good guy. That God's like, all right, we'll see.
Well, that kind of goes to, if you remember when we were talking about Adam and Eve, and there was that prophecy of like, all right, we're waiting for this one person who's going to crush the head of the snake. So you're reading about Noah, and you're like, all right, he saved the animals. That's like Garden of Eden type imagery. The dove comes back with the olive branch, like, oh, like Noah's the guy. Like he did it. And then chapter 9 happens. You go, no, he's not the guy. um, so that kind of continues that plot line of we're still waiting for the one who can successfully defeat evil. Well, it's not him. Yeah, my 3 words to describe his strengths were obedient, righteous, and blameless.
And fruitful.
And fruitful.
Do you want to talk about the weakness? No? Okay. Well, he liked his wine. He made wine pretty quickly after the, the flood.
Priorities.
Get his land.
Unless he saved some.
Right. Plants a vineyard, makes the wine.
I guess.
This is a great opportunity to talk about how the Bible teaches things. The Bible doesn't sit there and tell you drinking's bad, but it is full of stories about people doing dumb stuff when they've been drinking. So you read between the lines, you go, oh yeah, don't get drunk. So that's one way that you need to be interpreting the Bible. And that's where you get people who come to the Bible and they're like, see, Abraham had multiple wives and Jacob had multiple wives, so polygamy is okay. And you're like, did you read about their family dynamics and how bad that was? Clearly, don't do that. So, yeah. All right, let's talk about the story.
One thing that I didn't also realize until reading this is his son, or I guess it would be his grandson, Canaan. Is that like the father of the Canaanites? Like that's the where it all comes from.
Yep.
And Noah kind of,
Notice that when he curses,
yeah,
he doesn't curse Shem. Who's the one that did the
covering
Ham?
Ham.
He doesn't curse Ham, he curses Canaan.
Interesting.
So here is an interpretation that I've heard.
Yeah.
And it's because what we have here is something very vague. There's no scholar that can when it talks about how Ham went into the tent, like there's very vague phrasing going on here.
Yeah.
Like, and he saw his nakedness, and people are like, what does that mean? Like, it's clear that it's bad, but like, did you just literally see him naked, or is this an idiom? Um, the interpretation that I've heard that I kind of think makes more sense is elsewhere in the Bible, a man's nakedness could be a reference to his wife. And so Ham coming in
Um,
and seeing his father's nakedness while he's passed out drunk could be reference to him not doing anything with him, but with
yeah.
his wife.
And that
In
might
which
be
case Canaan would be that child.
gotcha.
And so he's cursing that lineage as a possible interpretation of
And
that.
like of going through the flood and then seeing his son do that, which is kind of probably loosely or maybe even closely tied to some of the stuff that God flooded the earth. It's like,
Right.
hey, dude, we
Yeah.
just went through a worldwide flood.
Yeah.
What you up been doing here,
For
bro?
that, yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like that makes a little bit more sense, at
Hmm.
least than like blaming somebody for looking at you naked when you're passed out drunk. You know,
Right.
that like
Yep.
then like if that's the interpretation, then what does the two other sons covering?
So they would be walking backwards so they wouldn't see Noah's wife and covering her up would be the. So anytime it says Noah's nakedness, it'd be referring to
Yeah.
his wife. And so they would cover her up, would be the interpretation. I'm
Okay.
not the expert on
Interesting.
all the language stuff. That was um, a way I've heard it kind of read. And I went, oh, that's one of those things. This doesn't this does not affect our theology about Christianity.
Yeah.
So it's okay, that's interesting. I might kind of hold on to that until someone brings more evidence and I don't have to throw out the old interpretation, but sometimes
Yeah.
it's nice just to kind of refresh it and look at it differently. Um, and see.
Yeah. And then like if you think about the line of Canaan, like the Canaanites, they were into
Mhm.
some weird stuff too.
Yep.
I was like, there's definitely a possibility of that. Like,
Yeah.
so
We'll be there will be two more stories that we read in this series. No, one more story, but we'll reference the other one twice. That's reminisce. I'm a liar. Two stories that reminisce about this moment.
mhm.
Can you think of any off the top of your head? What other moments were similar in this situation about drunkenness and sleeping with and all that sort of language?
Feel like David was just adultery, but
Was it
David
Abraham?
comes to mind. Does Abraham?
Getting close with Abraham.
Was it Isaac?
So Lot,
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I bought that out of my memory. Oh,
yep,
I didn't. I just read that.
yep,
Shocked me.
yep,
I'm like, that's one of those times where you're like, well, this was not taught in Sunday school. Like,
why would they
yep.
teach that in Sunday
well, no,
school?
I know, but like in the way that you remember as a kid, like I feel like to me, this whole thing has been like, oh, like this is a completely different way of how I remember it.
Hmm.
And reading Lot's story just kind of bad.
Sorry for that jump cut. We had a computer issue, but we were just wrapping up talking about everyone's favorite book, part of the Bible, Lot and his daughters.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm gonna hold back because there's something actually really cool that through this study I'll point to that, but I don't want to spoil it. So we're gonna come back to that story later on in the series, and then you'll be like, oh. So, but it is very reminiscent of this with Noah and Ham.
What an unfortunate name.
Very unfortunate Ham. Oh, you know what?
It could have
We,
been cool like Kevin Bacon, but he just got Ham.
you know, funny thing about names. So in Genesis, when it's going through Cain's descendants,
Mm-hmm.
it talks about one of his descendants named Nimrod.
Yeah.
And when
Wasn't he like pretty good though?
and that's the thing. He was a really good hunter. And so why in our culture do you call someone a Nimrod? Why is that an insult in our culture? And do you
Mhm.
know why that became an insult in our culture?
Because of PETA?
Because of Bugs Bunny.
No way.
And
What?
he called Elmer Fudd, okay, Nimrod, referencing like the hunter, but sarcastically.
Oh,
And now
Mm,
it's an insult because
that's
Bugsy
a very
Bunny.
that is a
that's
cool like
Yeah,
line.
I know.
play on words.
They totally changed the meaning of that word.
Ugh.
Mm,
Yes.
So Warner Brothers have ruined
They have
the
ruined the Bible
Nimrod
partially. Unbelievable.
heresy.
And so to combat that, if and whenever we have a son, we will name him Nimrod
Hmm. Your track
to
record is not
combat
to
it.
give you a son.
No. All right. I think that is everything about Noah that I've got. Anything else for you guys?
No,
think so.
I think we're also good.
Very cool. Um, One thing, this was actually in the bonus video that I did, but if you go with the age of all the people in Genesis is a literal age,
Mhm.
Noah was alive at the same time that Seth was alive. Seth being Adam's son.
Mm,
Okay.
And Lamech, who's Noah's dad, was alive at the same time Adam would have been alive.
well,
Wait,
So
hold on.
so Noah's dad
Adam
would have
lived long
been.
enough
So
that
are
by
you
the time he
saying
got to Lamech, Noah's dad, he was alive and he could have just talked to Adam about.
so are they related?
That's the whole lineage from Adam all the way through.
Okay. But you say okay. Okay.
Because they
Okay.
lived so long,
Yeah.
they would have all been alive at the same time.
Family reunions would be wild.
Oh man, crazy. And then who's the person that lived the longest?
Isn't that Jared, right?
No, he was
No.
second. He did pretty good. I don't know if he was second, but he was the father of Methuselah.
Methuselah.
Yes, I was
He
like,
lived 969 years,
couldn't be
Didn't
me.
get 1,000.
not quite 1,000. And if you actually look at the year he died, it was the year of the flood.
Wow,
At
what a
least,
good God he served, man.
yeah.
Did he die because of the flood?
Maybe he died and God said, "All right, time for the flood." He's gone. I don't know. But that's
So
just
he's gone. Let
people
him
that did
loose.
the math. They pointed out, hey, if you look at the years, he dies the year of the flood. So
Mm.
very interesting stuff. You guys will enjoy that bonus episode. I'll try to have it out tomorrow.
Do you think God slowed down the aging process of people back then? Like, if you look at 100-year-old,
You're like 20.
they look kind of like they've lived 100 years. What would a nearly 1,000-year-old
Thousand-year
look
old.
like?
If you're going with the literal interpretation, then you would
Yeah.
say the genetics were really strong. They
Yeah.
had long telomeres, is what I think they're called, the ends of DNA that kind of
Mm.
wear out. So you would say they were just, and it's not like every human. I think the
Yeah.
Bible's kind of hinting like just this group of humans lived this long. Um, that, yeah, they were just kind of blessed that way.
Mm.
But you get to Abraham and Isaac, and I mean, they're all blind by the time they're in their hundreds. So obviously the aging wasn't great by that point.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at other ancient cultures and their stories, when they're talking about their line of people, when they give their ages, they're like, and he was 40,000 years old. So the Bible's really tame compared to others.
Yeah.
So
Only 900.
only 900.
That'd be the worst.
Yeah.
That'd be so long.
I mean, if I was still active and healthy, I'll live as long as I want.
I got another
Yeah.
400 years till retirement.
Oh no, I'm still retiring at 60. And then taking it easy.
Yeah.
Well, cool. All right. That means next up, I got a bonus video to do so that way we get from Shem to Abraham. And then Abraham, then we get to read a lot. We'll do Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then Judah. When I did this with my small group the first time, I didn't tell them like this was the lineage of Jesus. I just said we're doing character studies.
Oh.
And so then when we got past Jacob, and then we didn't do Joseph, but instead we did Judah, they're all like, why would we do Judah? It's like, because we're following the line.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I told them. I'm like, oh, that's cool. So
Wasn't the plot twist you were hoping for?
not quite.
Just like, okay.
Yeah. Judah is actually one of my favorite stories.
Okay.
So, we'll get there. All right. Thank y'all for joining us. Let us know in the comments if you've got any questions. Subscribe and share with a friend. We need to grow. If we get 50 more subscribers this week, Connor's gonna shave his head.
That's the second time. Trust me. There's this kid that I work with. He should shave his head, and I told him if he'd do it, I'd shave my head in solidarity. Then I looked at pictures of bald people, and I was like,
never mind.
Ooh, I don't know.
How about a buzz cut?
Well, we'll see.
I mean, 50 subscribers is more than doubling my subscribers.
You know what? Here's what would happen. Kaylee would convince all of Mason's baseball team.
Do it, Kaylee.
Subscribe.
Do it.
And then I'd have to. I'm not doing it. They would.
You heard it here first, everyone. I'm gonna cut out the part where Connor says I'm not doing it, and there you go.
But if you do it, then you can grow your hair back out, and it'd be even.
But I'm already trying to grow my hair back out.
But why not just buzz it all off? It's even, and then you just let it.
Yeah, grow. I think that's a good plan. All right, enough about hair. Thank you guys. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.